So I have a lot of questions for you. Number one is biohacking. What do you call it? Industry or field or movement versus longevity industry.
Biohacking, when I wrote the definition for it, it's the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside of you so you have full control of your biology. Longevity is one of the pillars of this, but having the body you want, that feels good, has enough energy, having the brain you want with cognitive function, and having the longevity you want. They're different goals, they run together. And frankly, one of the reasons I started the biohacking movement is I ran an anti-aging longevity nonprofit group in Silicon Valley for 6 or 7 years. All of my members were over 60. I was the only guy under 30 in the room. And I could get no one to come. We were 2 minutes from Google's headquarters. No one from Google ever came. And it's like, guys, the things that make older people young are the things that make younger people powerful. So biohacking encompasses longevity because the practices are the same. And if you start longevity when you're 20, you're gonna spend a lot less money, you're gonna have a much higher quality of life. It's so much easier to prevent a problem than it is to reverse it. So I've written a major New York Times bestseller on longevity. Some of the more recent books you've seen are copying the same format. It's like, well, there's 4 big killers, right? And then there's between 7 and 9 things you have to maintain. And there's different perspectives on that. But that framework works. It's like a car. If you look, my car's gonna last forever, I change my oil. Like, did you change your tires? Like, you have to maintain all the systems. And that's what biohacking is all about. How do I maintain? And then how do I upgrade?
Amazing. I find so much alignment with that. That's what I say. When you take care of things, they last.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And then how do you feel about longevity advocates promoting the vegan diet? People like David Sinclair, Dan Buettner, and Bryan Johnson.
Number one, Bryan Johnson, who's speaking here at the Biohacking Conference, he's not a vegan. He takes 20 grams of collagen protein from cow skin every single day. Okay. So I'm not sure why he's saying vegan when he's not, but if you're taking 20 grams of animal products, don't think you can say that. Okay. What you're gonna find is, look at David Sinclair, who's a friend. I love David. I'm so grateful that he was willing to risk his tenure at Harvard by saying you can reverse aging in cells. That was a very risky thing because you can't do that. I said, well, I just did it, so I'm gonna say it. So hats off to him for validating things like resveratrol and things like NAD that have been part of the longevity stuff for 30 years. Niacinamide's a precursor to NAD. We've been taking that since the 80s. And resveratrol and its kissing cousin pycnogenol are things that longevity people have used for decades, but he proved what they were doing. We already had some evidence, but he really did it. But look at the health status of Dan Buettner and David Sinclair. And Dan, I've had him on the show. He's a lovely human being. He's a true believer in the longevity movement. But when we sat down, I said, okay, you've noticed that in these regions that people eat beans. So can you give me any mechanistic reason for this? He goes, no, I just know that's what they do. So then do it. Well, using epidemiology, which is a study of broad populations, to make personalized recommendations for people doesn't work. It doesn't work very well. And then there are some problems in that body of work where Hong Kong, that has the highest meat consumption and also has the longest lived people, didn't fit the model, but it should have been included in the model. And what you'll find in any body of medical research is, this is what we've all noticed. What are the outliers? What are things that don't fit the model? That's where progress happens. In my case, like I said, I've been a vegan, I've been a raw vegan, I've tested those out.
For how long?
I was for about 18 months.
Okay.
And I shattered 3 teeth during that time. I developed some autoimmune conditions. My thyroid got worse. These are predictable outcomes. Lots of joint pain, lots of skin problems, cognitive dysfunction, a lot of anxiety, harder to regulate my emotions. You ever notice that in vegans?
Yes, I've heard.
Sorry guys, I also went to Nepal and Tibet. I do a lot of consciousness work. And I teased the head lama at a monastery. You say no killing and you have a yak skin on your prayer pole. And he laughed right in my face. Tibetans love to debate. And he goes, one death feeds everyone. And I was like, oh my God. So I started calculating deaths per calorie.
I like that, yeah.
I built a regenerative farm on Vancouver Island, and we raise plants and we raise animals. If I want to eat a walnut off my walnut tree, I'm going to have to kill every squirrel. I've never had a walnut. They steal them all. That's how it works. So if you're eating a lot of plants, I promise you that way more animals died in the making of your plant than in that one cow. And the thing about cows, they go on land that is not suitable for irrigating and farming, and the land becomes healthier where the cows are. So we're taking land that shouldn't be farmed, we're keeping it wild, and we're allowing the animals to move around, just like the buffalo did. And this builds soil, which is a big carbon sink. So I'm killing fewer animals, I'm building soil, and I'm living longer by doing this. Oh, and I'm not getting kidney stones, which are caused by beans and grains and leafy greens and all these things because of calcium oxalate. So I would just say, having tried all of these things and looked at my rate of aging, I am aging at 72% the rate of average people. It's actually the same as Bryan Johnson. I spent $2 million over 20 years to do that, and I eat 200 grams of animal protein a day, which actually reduced my speed of aging from 83% to 72%.
Wow. You touched on so many good points. I am a big advocate for regenerative agriculture.
It's so important.
For global wellness as well as our own healthcare. I do have a question for you when it comes to gut microbiome, gut-brain connection. If you could touch on how that is part of the biohacking, specifically if you test that as part of your upgrade health labs.
When I was a kid, I lived in a basement with toxic mold, which causes the bacteria to become more aggressive, specifically strep. So I had strep throat every month for about 15 years. Took antibiotics just about every month for 15 years. So my gut bacteria was wrecked. In my mid-20s, I'm like, I gotta fix this. I tried everything. I even once swallowed a Russian electrical stimulation pill that every 5 seconds would like shock. I have to make intestinal motility. And I'm like, drinking every 5 seconds for 24 hours. It got stuck right here and my leg would kick. It was terrible. I don't recommend it.
How old were you then?
I was 26, 27. Like, 1 star would not recommend. But I've been just obsessed with this. In fact, the first big research into this at the first Biohacking Conference, which was about 12 years ago. The first guys to do that were selling test kits there. And then it turns out that company was on the wrong track. And then Microbiome, which is a company that has the most data on gut bacteria that I've seen so far, they launched their first 1,000 test kits at the Biohacking Conference. I've been advising them for almost 10 years now. And they have about 600,000 samples of gut bacteria, along with blood and saliva. And the amount of data that's come out of that, it's amazing because you can see not just the gut bacteria, and they found 10,000 new species in our gut we didn't know about, and they added it to our dictionary of bacteria. You can see viruses, including plant viruses that you get from eating raw plants. You can also see the fungal biome, which is a major, major contributor to aging. So if you have some fungus in your gut, especially the wrong kinds, it will make toxins all the time, and you can remove that. So your gut bacteria becomes tunable. I'm very interested in tuned FMT, fecal matter transplants, and I'm doing some work with Eterna on that as well, which is one of the longevity companies I work with. So I would say it's critically important, and one way to change it is change your diet and your gut bacteria changes. But the biggest thing that was a big part of my longevity program is the amount of soluble fiber you eat. There's enormous data that this contributes to longevity. So the average American, if they're lucky, gets 20 grams, like if they're working on it. So I said, well, I'll just get 40. And I formulated some stuff mostly based out of acacia gum. And I quadrupled the number of species in my gut over the course of 6 months when I was writing Superhuman, my longevity book. So young people's guts have a larger number of types of bacteria.
Diversity.
And you can predict your age based on your gut bacteria, just the diversity. So I have high gut bacteria diversity because I feed them.
Yeah. What about psyllium husk? You mentioned acacia gum.
Psyllium husk, not a fan. Psyllium husk is something that I used to use a lot when I was a raw vegan. Problem is, it's really rough on the lining of your intestines, and it oftentimes gets caught in little pockets and it can make them worse. So if you're going to use psyllium, it needs to be exceptionally fine ground in order for it to work, but the roughage, not so good on the gut. Our guts do better, frankly, on an all meat diet versus an all psyllium diet. I'm not a fan of carnivore. I tried it for 3 months when I was testing out the bulletproof diet. Yeah. And now I just pissed off all the carnivore people. And guys, you're acting like the vegans, man.
Yeah.
We don't have to be in tribes. I did this before we called it carnivore in about 2013, before I wrote the bulletproof diet. People have lost a couple million pounds, like 600,000 copies sold globally. And first big book on intermittent fasting, and I was talking specifically, okay, what happens if you just do meat? Well, magic happens because you stop eating plant toxins. But you don't want to do it forever. So do a 1 month carnivore cleanse, hallelujah. But for most people, having some carbohydrate works better. You'll find as you go carnivore, if you measure insulin levels, they drop and drop and drop. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Except low insulin is 4 times more predictive of all-cause mortality than high insulin. It turns out insulin and cortisol are critical. They should be at the right level. And if you suppress either one too much, you're not going to like your life. So yes, watch out for plant toxins. Does it mean you shouldn't eat plants? No. What it also indicates is that you should take an extract of plants instead of eating the whole plant some of the time. Turmeric, for example. You ever slice up turmeric, just kind of like a carrot? Tastes good, right? Super high in oxalates, but if you take turmeric extract, it has no oxalates, and oxalates age your tissues.
Liquid form? Or
Yeah, liquid form, just capsules. Yeah.
Got it. All right. Before we get into rapid fire questions, one about global. You mentioned expanding your biohacking movement globally. Could you touch more on that and how you see people worldwide benefiting from biohacking practices?
There are millions of biohackers in Latin America. In fact, I just wrote a foreword for the first book written in Spanish on biohacking for LA Biohacker.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. I mean, congratulations to her for doing the work, right? But I was honored to be able to contribute to that. And I think 400,000 copies of the Bulletproof Diet sold in Japan. And I went to Japan just to do a book signing and say, thanks, guys. And if you've ever been to Japan, people are so polite. I love the culture there. And they'd walk in and they lift up their shirts. And I'm like, what is going on here? And they go, abs. And they were showing me their abs that they grew by putting butter in their coffee.
Oh,
I wasn't even selling the bulletproof stuff there, right? And they got it. And when you go to Europe, biohacking is a thing. Germany is huge on biohacking. So I am bringing the Biohacking Conference over the next couple of years to the Middle East. You can find all my books at every bookstore in Dubai.
Amazing.
So you'll see me do something in UAE, you'll see me do something in Europe, and you'll see me do something in Latin America in partnership with people who are doing local language evangelism of this. Biohacking's a movement. I did not trademark the term when I started using it because this is something that's a society thing, it's a human right. And it has nothing to do with me owning it. I created the term. My name's in Webster's Dictionary when it became a new word in 2018. But there's lots of people, lots of perspectives, and I'm absolutely grateful for Dan Buettner and all the work he's done. I'm absolutely grateful for David Sinclair, and it's okay that we don't agree. Like, I'll eat your meat, you can have my peasant food, it's okay. One of us is gonna live longer, let's look at our markers and see what happens, right? And it's okay, like this is how it always works, right? Like, let's look at the data. I will become vegan again if you can show me that it's gonna make me live longer and I feel good. But I don't think that's how it works.
I'm glad you mentioned that because in Europe, people are trying to live a little healthier, and vegan movement has a big, prominent positioning right now, which I don't agree with. But so you're needed in Europe. That's what I'm saying.
I'm kind of shocked. So throughout history, especially in Europe, there is such a thing as peasants, and you feed the peasants gruel. Gruel is oatmeal. Right? And if you're going to work all day in the farms, you get a little scoop of butter on top. And you know that protein is precious. So if you're really poor, you have chickens because you can eat the eggs. And if you get a little bit more money, then you get a goat because chickens and goats can eat everything. And then you get milk from the goat and you can eat the goats. A little bit more money, a little bit more land, then you can have sheep, which are nutritionally better than goats. And you get really wealthy, you can have a cow. Oh my God, look at all this milk. This is so good. And then you can eat the cow. Oh, I forgot pigs. They're right after goats, probably. They're one of the more efficient ways of making protein. And this is how it always works. So the wealthier you are, the healthier your food. And the idea that let's trick people into paying extra money for peasant food, which makes them sick, gross. That's not how we do it. In Egypt, they fed bread to the people who didn't have any choice, and the royalty ate fish. You go to Machu Picchu in Peru. They would have runners bring fish 200 miles inland for the royalty, and everyone else ate beans and corn. By the way, Peruvians are some of the shortest people on earth for a reason. You start giving them steak, they grow. Who would have thought? Even in China, where there's been a shortage of animal protein for a long time, as they increased their consumption of pork over the last 20 years, the average height has gone up by 3 inches from increasing animal protein in kids. So you trick Europeans and Americans into eating peasant food and being less fertile and having sicker children? I don't think that's ethical, and I don't think the science backs it up. I don't care how loudly Big Food shouts. Big Tobacco used to tell me that smoking was healthy. They were maybe a little bit commercially motivated. Oh wait, Big Tobacco bought most of the big food companies. They own them right now. It's the same game plan.
On that note, I do have a question about tools and tips in cutting through the noise of the marketing of all the health, marketing claims that we hear in biohacking industry as well.
Look at the data, look at the track record of the person, and I struggled with this greatly when in my 20s and early 30s. I interviewed a couple hundred of the leaders in the longevity movement back then. I learned longevity from people in their 80s, right? And you find over time that there's people who do the work, really understand it, and that they're teaching and they're giving back. And they're consistent. And then you find there's people you've never heard of, and they pop up with the latest, greatest thing. Maybe it's real, but you gotta look at, do the people who have a trusted reputation, do they also ascribe to that? A great example of this, a new product in longevity called Stem Regen. I first thought, I was like, this is totally a scam. And then I looked at Christian Drapeau, who created this. More than 10 years of research, dozens of clinical studies, and you have a conversation with him. You go, oh, this is a true expert in the field who stumbled on something new. But quite often, it's not that. So what you want to do is find people who you trust. And understand there are marketing people who will train you to be trustworthy even though you're not. And all of us, though, have an intuitive sense. Is this someone who I trust? And as they say, trust but verify. So look at someone who does a job of curating good stuff. That's my job. I find the leaders in longevity, the leaders in biohacking, and I help them to become better seen. Andrew Huberman was on my show before he had a podcast. Let's see, Peter Attia has been on my show before he had a podcast. And it's funny because Peter has written a book on longevity that says you can't extend human life, which I'm like, hold on a second, what are we doing here? I don't think that over-exercising is the way to live a long time, and nor statins or over-vaccinating, which are the primary strategies in that book. But I absolutely support the idea, show me the evidence, show me that it's working, and let's see what happens.
Switching gears here, you and I meditated together in Orlando for a week with Joe Dispenza.
That was so cool.
Did your life change after that? And the second question is, how does mindfulness play into biohacking?
Well, the definition of biohacking is change the environment around you and inside of you so you have more control of your own biology. I'm a huge fan of Joe Dispenza's work. In fact, I'm honored he's presenting on the science of meditation and breath work here at the Biohacking Conference. And I found when I went and I did Joe's breath work for 7 days, it's a really profound experience. And some of the states that I was getting into, I'm like, oh, I know this state because I get there from neurofeedback with my 40 years of Zen company. And Joe has an entirely different way of getting there that doesn't have the same technology. So I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could access this advanced state that way. So I really learned a lot, and it was a really profound experience. And I was hesitant in the early days of biohacking to talk about, I've done shamanic training. I kind of sprinkled in, yes, I did ayahuasca in 1999 in Peru before it was cool. And I actually think ayahuasca is overused and a little bit dangerous now. If you don't have the right people with you, I think it's one of the riskier psychedelics. But right now, I'm launching ketamine as an add-on to my 40 Years of Zen program because altered states are the states you go into to allow you to edit the settings in your operating system in your body. So your body's reactive to stuff without showing you what's going on. And you go into these states and you sort of see the world the way your body sees the world. And then you can go in and say, you can chill about that. So that's been a major part of my evolution as a human. Breath work, holotropic breathing, Joe Dispenza's work. And the center for me is the 40 years of Zen, where I put a computer on my head, and if I'm meditating the wrong way, it'll tell me, and if I do it the right way, it'll let me more quickly enter these mystical states where you have expanded awareness and expanded ability to just interoperate with your body.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear him on stage. Supplementation concerns. So I hear a lot of people are concerned with toxicity levels when they're supplementing and they're not sure about the brand quality. Have you heard anything?
It's weird that people are worried about supplement toxicity, but not food toxicity. It's so weird. I would say that your chances of getting toxicity from most supplements is lower than going to a fast food restaurant and eating deep fried oil. In fact, I'd rather smoke a cigarette than eat French fries at a fast food place. I don't recommend either one. I'm not a fan of smoking. But are some supplements tainted with heavy metals? Yes. Are many pharmaceuticals tainted with heavy metals? Yes. No. So quality always matters. And sadly, sometimes price is an indicator of quality, but marketing people have learned that you can just charge more and put it in a pretty bottle. Again, it comes down to reputation. It comes down to, do they publish studies? Do they talk about their standards? And I do my best to curate trusted brands at the Biohacking Conference, and I talk about a lot of brands on my show. Yeah. In fact, some people complain about it, like, why are you talking about all this stuff? So people know what works and what doesn't work. And that said, are your risks of taking a supplement from toxicity, are they much higher than the risk of benefits? No. If you are mineral deficient, you are not going to like your life. And most people are mineral deficient because plants steal minerals, they don't provide minerals, and because we don't even have minerals in our soil anymore. So supplementing minerals would be a great idea. Supplementing grass-fed organs, which are two of the big products that I make for Upgrade Labs. Those are terribly important. And yes, the nootropics work, and there are cheap ones, there are expensive ones, but toxicity concerns, especially for things made in Europe or the US, it is a regulated industry. People say it's not. Yeah, it's highly regulated by a really powerful group called the FTC, which is, these are the good guys. These are the guys who, not fair trade, or, what does it stand for? Federal, I forget what FTC stands for. But their job is to make sure that companies don't lie. Right? And that means if you say something, it damn well better be true if you're a supplement company. And that means that for every statement you make about your product, you need to have encrypted, time-stamped things showing, I had a study backing up what I said. Yeah. And so I just would say, yes, you can have toxins in supplements. It is a regulated industry. It's just not regulated by the drug guys, the FDA. So the FDA would be the bad guys and the FTC would be the good guys.